Because what happens, any 18-year-old who's dealing with porn, let's go back to that for a second. What does he do? He finds another 18-year-old guy. And then they get together to hold each other accountable. And what that looks like is, how'd you do this week? Oh man, it was a rough week. Me too. Like, you want accountability? Tell your mom. No, she'd scream. She'd throw my computer out the window. Oh, so what you're trying to avoid is accountability that matters. Like, you want accountability? Tell 3 women in your church that you have a porn problem. You want them to pray with you about it, and you're going to, check in once a week. And if you don't call them, you want them to call you, because probably there's a reason you didn't call them. Like 3 soccer moms, they're going to kill you. You're not going to text a soccer mom at 4 a.m. asking for the Covenant Eyes code for your phone.
Welcome back to the Provisionist Perspective. I'm Drew.
And I'm Eric.
And today we have our special guest back, Tim Nichols. And one thing that we love here at the Provisionist Perspective is pushback. And he gave us a little bit of pushback on our episode about Ravi Zacharias and that scandal. You can check out the link to it below in the description. And one thing we were talking about is the Billy Graham rule. And he basically said, you guys are full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. This is a bad idea. You and him have talked a little bit about it. But we're also going to talk about, if the Billy Graham rule isn't sufficient to kind of protect against this sort of stuff as far as sexual temptation and that, then what should we do? So here's Tim Nichols. If you don't know who he is, sorry about it. Go watch our other episode. He introduces himself there. And welcome back, Tim. It's good to see you again.
Good to be back. It's been so long.
I know, the whole 15-minute break that we just had, all wearing the same clothes, but to everyone else, it's been a week. So welcome back.
You might catch me in this shirt a week from now anyway. So
this is a shirt that I have for work, and I have at least 2 of these, maybe 3. And so I can give the illusion of the fact that I'm wearing the same shirt a lot of the time when really it's not. And plus, you usually get like 2 or 3 wears out of a shirt too, right? So
that's what I think. Especially with underwear, you go front, you go back, you turn inside out, and you go front, you go back again.
On your own on that.
That's for those who know, that's a line from Big Hero 6.
Yeah.
And
fantastic movie. That movie is hilarious. I loved it.
And in his reaction, Wasabi's reaction to that is,
that's a good one. Well, Tim, it's good to be back. So you're going to tell us all about how ridiculously stupid the Billy Graham rule is, right? We're all about the polemics here. So we just kind of ramp things up to 11, and then
dial it back a little from there.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to do that. But go ahead, Tim. On a scale of 0 to 10, how stupid are we? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm not doing that.
Please,
you can ask Amber. She'll tell you.
Good point. That's fair. A good point.
So what I pushed back on, and the place I would want to start the conversation, is once upon a time, a traveling minister, finds himself at a place where they need to stop off and get some lunch, sends all 12 of his accountability partners into the grocery store. And when they come out, they find him sitting there chatting with a woman, and they're wondering what in the world, what's going on here. And it turns out upon further investigation that this is exactly the kind of chick he should not be chatting up alone. And spoiler alert, it's Jesus. All the juicy details in John 4. Jesus breaks the Billy Graham rule. And so if we set up our rules for a Christian organization, or for just like sensible things that a wise Christian man should do in such a way that we're disqualifying Jesus from ministry, we may have overstepped somewhere. That's kind of where I want to start.
Yeah. It's funny because as you first shared that, or was it you or was it Eric that sent it to me? I can't remember which, but the 12 wasn't there.
Oh no, I phrased it a little harder in the thing I originally sent Eric.
Yeah.
I wanted it to take a minute for the penny to drop.
Yeah. That one was good. I remember being like, okay, Fair.
Hard to argue with.
Whereas our listeners will go, huh? 12? I know what he's talking about. So
yeah. And what we were talking about was, if we're going to, in our Ravi episode, we didn't want to be Debbie Downer the whole time. The episode was mostly Debbie Downer and lamenting the state that Ravi left things in. And then we wanted to give some and rightly so. And then we want to give some prescriptions. And one of the things we said, and we got pushback on several fronts, a lot of comments and things like that. Yours was the most compelling. And one of the things that we said was, you just shouldn't be alone with a woman. And not only the Jesus example gives that, puts that into question a little bit, but also Ravi did that when he brought someone on the plane with him for the appearance of it, but it didn't work either. That didn't prevent anything, even though he was kind of doing that. But there was something about when we were recounting all of the Ravi investigation that came out, there was something that stuck out to you, Tim, right?
Yeah, the big thing that jumped out at me in Arzim's own review of their situation was, there was a moment where somebody asked Ravi about, I forget what, but asked him.
I think it was Lorianne Thompson. I think about his communication with Lorianne Thompson
about like what's going on with that, and he got really, really angry and basically stopped talking to that staffer and exiled them to Siberia. And like that, to me, this is one of the big things that you look for. I'm not a Billy Graham rule advocate particularly, but if you can't have those conversations, if you're not grateful that someone is seeking you out for that kind, if Eric comes to me and goes, "Hey Tim, so as I was leaving the office the other day, I just saw you sitting with this woman, and it felt weird, man. What's going on?" If I'm not happy that we're having that conversation, something is really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And if I get mad and exile into Siberia, we kind of know what's wrong, don't we?
We should. We should.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing we pointed out in the episode, is that around just before Christmas, Eric mentioned that he was family, wife and kids were headed out, back to Cali like a little bit early or something. And I asked you the question, how are you doing? You're going to be okay? Like, what's going on and stuff? It's going to be you, the room and internet alone for a week. How's that going? And you weren't like, how dare you question my integrity? We're red-blooded human beings. And I think that, like you said, Tim, I think I would appreciate that. I'd be like, man, thanks for asking.
I did appreciate that, because it was something like, he kind of gets it, and he's concerned for the same things I am, and he cares about my soul. And if that's not your response, there's something going on there. Okay,
and it may be as simple as just a pride problem, but there's still something going on there.
Right.
True. How dare you question me? I'm in control of this organization.
It could be that, but look me in the eye and tell me that's not going to lead to a whole bunch of other bad things.
Right.
That's right. So, what, as a recovering Billy Graham rule guy, Tim, what brought you out of it? What got you to question it?
There was a specific moment, Eric. I think I actually used the words, I didn't set out to be this person when I wrote you. I grew up in a family, my dad's a minister, observed the Billy Graham rule his whole life. Still, I think would, if he were still in pastoral practice. I grew up expecting to follow the Billy Graham rule my whole life. That's just good wisdom, and it's how a minister should behave. And I got through Bible college following it, and I got through seminary following it, and that was absolutely my expectation, and launched into ministry following it. And there was a moment, it was a pastoral counseling situation, and I had arranged to have an older woman join the young woman that I was counseling with in my office. And we'd gone through, I think, 2 or 3 sessions like that. And something wasn't right. And providentially, what happened was the older woman was unable to join us at the last second, and for a variety of reasons, like this conversation needed to happen. And there were things about the situation that were exigent. And I remember I'm sitting at my desk. The younger woman is sitting in the chair in front of me. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember standing up, walking around my desk and shutting the door, because my office was located in a space where all kinds of people passed by through the hallway, and leaving the door open wasn't a realistic option. What was going through my head at the time is golden rule or Billy Graham rule here. I would not want to be in her situation, having this sensitive conversation with the door open and anybody walking behind me in the hallway, listening to that. I cannot treat her like this. And that means I'm going to break the man-made rule to keep the golden rule. And I remember realizing this is happening and just being like, okay, God, you are allowing this situation to develop in this way. It's on you. I'm going to trust you with it, and shut the door. And that provoked a crisis of faith in the Billy Graham rule.
Which is a funny thing to even say, right?
Right. Well, it's even funnier when you realize that some people haven't had it yet. Because what came out in that session was that the older woman I was using as my buffer was involved in the abusive environment in such a way. So what got disclosed in that session could not have been said with the older woman in the room.
That was the bit of, I heard this story in preparation, but I don't think I knew that aspect of it.
And all of a sudden was like, okay, so that's kind of a perfect storm. Obviously you don't make, hard cases make bad law, right?
Sure.
Right.
But not for nothing, this is not the law that God made. But that was what provoked my crisis of faith, was like, if I'd kept the rule instead of keeping the golden rule, I wouldn't have found out. I would have become part of the machinery that was helping to grind this person to bits. And I was able to do something different because God arranged things where it was clear to me that I needed to follow what he had actually told me to do instead of the man-made rule. And that was my wake-up call to sort of re-examine it, upon which I noticed, like, hey, John 4, Jesus doesn't follow this either. If the goal is to have a ministry like Jesus, maybe I need to rethink the rules I'm following.
And what that caused me to, when you told me that story, and what it caused me to reflect on was, how I had come off in the Ravi episode. And I think what I was doing was I was, giving solidarity to Drew's situation, where Drew was ministering to college students, and that's probably wise policy the vast majority of the time. And then in solidarity with Drew, and then also we were talking about the leader of an apologetics organization. Is he really counseling anyone? Is what purpose does he have to be alone with women? So I think that was the context that I was speaking in. But I did come across as, I didn't soften it. I didn't offer any sort of,
we tend to dial everything up to 11 here.
I dialed it up to 11, and I was super dogmatic, which upon reflection was like, well, I'm a bleeding hypocrite, because in my pastoral counseling training, we didn't follow the Billy Graham rule. Talbot School of Theology doesn't follow the Billy Graham rule. What they do is, and all the middle school kids do. What they do is, see what I did there? They do talk about this. So it is, you are going to be sitting in front of somebody of the opposite sex, whether you're a female counselor or a male counselor, female counselee, male counselee. And there are going to be things there that come across. There's the counseling term, right? Countertransference. There's going to be countertransference. There's going to be things in you that trigger anger, bitterness, jealousy, and maybe even lust as well. You may get these attractions that happen in the counseling environment. How do you deal with that? How do you recognize that it's happening? What structures do you have in place to discuss that with a mentor, discuss that with someone higher in your organization, if that countertransference is too much, to refer that person. This is how I was trained to do it. And I've counseled women behind a closed door. And similar to you, Tim, had fruitful counseling sessions where if someone was else in the other room, none of that would have ever been said. So I was like, I kind of came off like a hypocrite, and that's not how I was trained. And so then, yeah, how do you do it then? If the Billy Graham rule isn't something that Jesus followed, and like, does the Billy Graham rule actually, is that how this works? Do people just kind of fall into this stuff, or how do, not just counseling situations, but any kind of pastoral person in power situations, how does this stuff come about, where they start having sexual relationships with people that they shouldn't, and then what do we do about, how do we flee those things?
Yeah. Which is, you have to be obedient, right? Flee youthful lusts. That's black letter Bible.
So then, how does this stuff happen? If it's not you're alone and how does this happen?
Because here's the pushback that I got, because I was kind of, just giving a little bit of a, here's what we're going to end up talking about to my wife about the Billy Graham rule, and that, maybe this isn't really a rule or whatever. And then she was like, but then obviously they did break that rule at some point, right? So then it does work. It's just that when you break it, like,
right.
So
but the command God actually gave was do not commit adultery. And when you keep that one also, it works. Like the point.
and so your point was, talk a little bit about what was it called? The laws that the Jews kind of put in place to prevent them from breaking the actual law. Talk a little bit about that.
So like the classic one here is there's a law in the Old Testament that you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And people struggle with what exactly was going on there. And there's a whole sociocultural, discussion to be had about what was going on there. But it's one of the 613 commandments in the Torah. You're not allowed to do that. The reason you can't get a cheeseburger at a mall in Jerusalem today, and a buddy of mine tried, he walked up to the McDonald's there in the mall, and just without thinking said,
"Can I have a cheeseburger?"
I'd like a cheeseburger, and they're like, "No."
Something that we would just never even remotely think about.
There's
right? Like
literally two little McDonald's next to each other with a wall between them, separate kitchen, separate counter. And so he gets his burger, and then he goes over to the other one to get a milkshake, and without thinking sets his burger down on his still wrapped, but his burger down on the counter, and the girl behind the counter says, "Pick that up, please. That can't be, like, I have to clean the counter now."
This is similar to my experiences in India, where you have KFC with veg kitchen and chicken kitchen.
Right. You can get your Kentucky Fried Carrots or whatever. So similar situation, but the rabbinical interpretation, the reason milk and meat are never mixed in kosher cooking is that there is a chance, no matter how slight, that some portion of the milk involved in that slice of American cheese on the cheeseburger may have come from a cow, that some portion of the meat in that burger came from the calf. And in modern, like, they don't even come from the same breed of cattle. So that's not a thing, but
in their minds.
But there's a chance, no matter how slight. And so we erect fences around the law so that we don't even get close to breaking the law.
And that's the whole point of the Billy Graham rule.
The point of the Billy Graham rule is to build fences around the law such that we don't get close and break the actual law. And I want to clarify, like, I think there are situations where the Billy Graham rule is wise. When Mike Pence was getting crap for it, I came out, for whatever my social media presence is worth, I came out hard in his favor. And basically told a bunch of my friends, I prefaced it by saying, if you're making fun of Mike Pence right now or you're outraged, I'm going to offend you, but you can stop reading now. So that's something. And then went in on, like, a marriage does not succeed by accident. It's a lot of very hard, very deliberate work, and betraying your spouse is not okay. And if this is what's working for them, and you're on your third divorce, you got nothing to say here. Like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And if that's what's working for them, and that's either because of where his temptations are or because of the field he's working in, if that's what he needs to do, think, great.
And for me, I will say, for my part in that episode, I'm probably the dogmatic person here. So, but for me, it's less about the law of like the hedge of protecting from doing, this thing, although that's an aspect of it. It's the aspect of being, in a position like Mike Pence was in, or even still is in terms of his position of influence and being a former vice president, is the blameless quality. And I know that he's not an elder, and I'm technically not an elder, even though I'm in a pastoral position and should probably qualify for all of the things that an elder should qualify for. It's about the being above reproach, like we talked about. Was it in this? It was just now in this episode, I'm getting confused, that we talked about the, seeing Eric with another woman. Hey, what's going on here? It's kind of the question of being above reproach. Like, let's just make sure that everything's okay here. So that's kind of my thinking on it. Do you have any thoughts?
And my somewhat pushback would be, where I get nervous is where we all decide that what being above reproach means is that we follow Billy Graham. Because that's not what it looked like on Jesus. So there have to be some, and that doesn't mean that's never what it looks like. And that's really important to me. Like, I don't want to come off saying this is just trash.
However, that's what the thumbnail is going to say, by the way. So that's how we're going to get people to click on this.
Put that right across my face.
The Billy Graham rule is dumb. Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. I had the vision in my mind of the photo with you in a bubble of the Billy Graham rule is trash or something to that effect.
Well, if you must, go ahead.
We will get approval from you first of any thumbnail with a bubble coming out of your mouth first before we put it up there. So don't you worry, listener.
That's great. But that said, we can't get into a place in the same way that we can't get into a place where we believe that being above reproach with regard to alcohol means that you just never have a beer in your hand.
Right. And there's probably a number of our listeners that would say that, but
right. Well, Jesus made the good stuff. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's Passover has a bunch of cups of wine in it. There's that.
See, what you got to understand, Tim, is that it was really grape juice. That's what you got to understand.
Yeah, that.
So in part 3 of our episode with Tim,
Acts 2, Peter's
going to be the Tim Nichols series.
They're mocking the believers that the Spirit has come upon, and they talk about how they're all drunk on grape juice. Yeah, doesn't go well. Doesn't work. The problem there, right? We want something we can photograph. We want it to be easy. The basic pastoral temptation here is we want it to be easy. I want to be able to look from across the street and I saw a Coors in your hand. That's bad.
Yeah.
I didn't see
Show me the
good.
line so that I can walk all the way up to it and not cross it, and we can be okay.
Right. And it's preferably something that's really easy for me to tell from a distance without having to have an actual conversation about what's in your heart, because that's messy and I don't want to.
That's a good point.
This is where you have the conversation. Hey, Eric, who was that? It's recon by fire. You put a bullet into the bushes and see if something shoots back. Right. If he gets real mad, I just got real curious about who that is.
Right.
If he's like, oh yeah, that's my niece. Okay. All right.
Right.
Right. But you want to seek out those conversations. We're supposed to be stirring one another up to love and good deeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do.
we want to be able to pull into our, like the way American houses and stuff are now, or just culture is like, you open the garage door, you come in, you close the garage door, you get out, you go inside, you watch TV. And so you can flip down the blinds and look from the safety of your home and go, oh, yep, he's good. Yep. Don't need to do anything. Don't need to go get in anybody's mess. We're happy. You're happy. Good to go.
Right. And if you're actually struggling with lust, we're not to adultery yet, but like that the situation Eric is talking about has come up in a counseling situation. There's a little, because okay, let's talk about how this actually happens, because we're going to get messy here, right?
Let's do it.
So how it does not happen, a pastor is in his office with a female counselee, and he stands up innocently to go walk over to the bookshelf and pull his Bible off the shelf and trips over a credenza and lands with his penis inside her. Oh dear, adultery has begun. Like, that's not how this right? If
no one was here to see this, and so now they can't know that it wasn't. I should have been obeying the Billy Graham rule.
It's not. That's not what happens.
Right.
What happens is there's a little spark of attraction. She really likes him. And the way this was explained to me in my premarital counseling by a really wise older couple in ministry that counseled us, was you got to understand there's a bunch of forces that push you away from the person you're married to, because they know what you're really like. And you know what they're really like. And in a counseling situation, you're in this artificial situation where you don't really know them, they don't really know you, but it's an artificially intimate environment where they're there to tell you their secrets. And, and you're, the wise and understanding person that they're not married to, because that jerk. So there's a lot pulling you together, and it's not real.
Right.
It's not real life. So you have that going. And most of the time from the inside, like, you might notice, yeah, she really likes spending time with me. We're going to spend a little less time together. Every once in a while, though, that catches something in me. Things are difficult at home. Kimberly and I are going through a rough patch, and there's a little bit of it. I'm looking forward to the next session more than I should be. I stretched the session by an extra 20 minutes because she needed the help, and like, whatever, there starts to be that stuff. That's what it looks like from the inside. And what that is what James talks about. Desire gives birth to sin. It's desire. It needs to be killed there, because if you don't kill it there, desire gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. And we have a genealogy of death, and we want to kill the grandmother, not wait until it's killing me. Kill it at the desire stage. So that does mean for this particular person, I'm going to refer, or I'm going to find someone else to bring in, and we're going to do this together. Or, right. And if I'm talking with a partner, and like, that's where I should be having the messy conversation, or where my wife will be like, that one went kind of long. What's going on? This is another thing. Like, one of the things I tell people that I work with pastorally is I do not undertake to keep secrets from my wife. Like, that I don't come home and blab to my wife just for funsies, and my wife doesn't gossip. But if I need help, God gave me her, and I'm going to get it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one conversation that I have with the students when I'm talking about confidential stuff is, I'll just say, I'm just being honest with you. This doesn't leave Kirsty and I, but I'm probably going to talk about this with her. I just want to let you know, so you have my confidence, but it's between us as one flesh. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think in even a more professional pastoral counseling situation, you do have, the counselor may have their spouse, but you can also have, referrals and consults with, other pastors and other people on your staff. So that's understood too, that it's confident here, but here isn't just me. And yeah, I'm not keeping secrets here.
Yeah. And so what you're saying, Tim, I'm just going to throw this up here, is this passage in James where it says, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away and by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. You're saying, don't wait, kill it at the temptation and desire stage before it gets to anything else, and have those conversations early on, so to speak.
Yes. And you want to have those conversations, and you want to encourage the people around you to have those, you can't, if you create the kind of organizational culture where if I come to you and say, listen, I should probably refer this counselee, you pull the fire alarm and I get fired, then what's going to happen is people won't tell you. And then they're trying to deal with it on their own. And that does not go well. So you have to create the kind of culture where we want to know when you're in verse 14, and we want to help you stop it there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I keep going back to my training at Talbot, and this is kind of like bringing me back to it, where we didn't talk about things in terms of sin and shamefulness, or, if you're having these desires, that somehow that's not normal, or something's wrong with you. And are you really a Christian? Like it wasn't done in that way at all, but I could see how it would be in some church contexts, right? That kind of gets thrown around. And, if you admit any kind of weakness or desire at all, then yeah, there's grave consequences. And so you keep it to yourself. And what it was for me, and we would do this, we would have these conversations in class and also in small groups, where we would be practicing pastoral counseling, and we would bring it to kind of like, you'd have a panel, and you'd bring it to them and go, hey, here's what's going on here, and here's what it's brought up in me. And they can reflect and here's, for you, and this for this situation, and also for you. And for me, what I learned through that process, and I'll admit, that process is not fun. It is not fun. No, it's really uncomfortable to sit there and recount a counseling session and be like, I became really angry at my counselee. I was mad at them for what they were telling me was going on in their life. What does that say about me? What is that? And getting the feedback on it and realizing some of it's true. And so what it was for me, and this was what this brought out for me, was I was able to bring some situations that were happening in youth ministry, where what I realized what it was for me was that I have a little bit of a savior complex, and I like helping people. I like being the guy who is helping you and being the awesome guy that helps you with your problems. And that goes to really bad places if you're not talking about it, if you don't have people who you can reflect that by and recognize when that countertransference is happening and when that person is activating that savior thing in you. So that's what it was for me. And it was work to get there. And you have to have that structure in place. And that's so Tim, that's the kind of thing you're talking about, right?
Yes. You have to have people in your life that you can have those messy conversations with. And you have to be the sort of person that is willing to have those conversations and invite those conversations with other. Like, one of the things that happens is you start telling the truth to your friends. You are like, there's a winnowing process that happens where some of them will stop talking to you and the rest of them will double down. And that's great. Because those are the people who are going to go into battle with you when you need it. And that's huge. You have to have that. And for me, I think I said this in the introduction, I'm a massage therapist. So the whole being alone in someone with a room goes to a whole different level when I'm also working on their body. I mean, on the one hand,
Christians be massage therapists?
Yes. But there's a particular kind of accountability structure, and above reproach needs to look a certain way. in order to do that. If I'm the kind of guy where I'm like, I tell you I'm a massage therapist and you're like, well, that kind of figures, then something has gone terribly wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And if I'm the kind of person where people in the church will refer their friends to me because they know that they're safe with me, then something else is happening. But also for me, it's a sunk cost. Like trusting me to be alone with a female counselee where we're clothed and facing each other and just talking is kind of the least of what I get trusted with.
And I think good points. Fantastic.
I mean,
points.
that's a whole nother level, right? I mean,
yeah.
You're kind of pushing that and saying, what is it that Christians can be comfortable with, while at the same time not lusting.
Yeah. And I think what do we need to do that? Like, just like you talked in your program at Talbot, we spent a fair amount of time in, massage therapy training dealing with this because you need to. Transference and countertransference are very much an issue. And it's something we spent a good bit of time on what it looks like from the inside. Because that's the thing is, you never imagine that it's going to happen to you. And from the outside, it just looks so dumb. And
like as far as it looks dumb in the sense of how did you end up here? How did you do that or whatever else?
Seriously, your client brought a 6-pack, you had 3 beers apiece and slept with each other in the treatment room. How, you moron. This is a real situation, by the way, that actually happened at a place I know about. That like, and no one going through training thinks that's going to be them, right?
It comes back down to the whole take heed lest he who thinks he stands fall, passage that we've talked about before in this program.
Right.
And I think
part of what you have to do is learn what does it look like at the beginning from the inside? What does James 1:14 look like from the inside? What is going to happen in me that needs to raise that first red flag that something is going on?
And to this point, I want to touch on this briefly from a theological perspective, because our one of the things that the provisionist perspective is about is how our theology really informs our practice and what we do and what we think about ourselves and how we do ministry or counseling or whatever else. And I think this is theologically significant or practically significant in the sense that, so it says here again, but each one is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings death. So what I gather from this is that temptation and your own desires themselves are not sinful, because it gives birth to sin. So desire has to conceive and give birth to sin. And so, and I'd like to do an episode about this one day, about same-sex attraction and how a lot of people think that that's like, if you're even attracted to the same sex, that you're sinning, by doing that and stuff. And yet this says that our temptation and our desires are not sin or sinful in and of themselves, but it's how we respond to them and what we do with them that's really important. And that's not insignificant. So
that's huge, and it becomes really important in seeking accountability. And if you create the kind of culture where somebody copping to a desire, is career suicide, then you're going to get the kind of culture where no one talks about that and they try to handle it themselves. If you create the kind of culture where we understand you are going to have desires that ought not be fulfilled, and we are here to help you deal with that when it comes up, and it will. We want to have a conversation. Let's talk about it. And oh, by the way, speaking of, I noticed this thing yesterday. What's going on with that?
Right.
Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is that one of the key preventative, if you will, factors in this whole lust, sexual immorality, adultery scheme is a lifestyle of conversations that are uncomfortable that you're having regularly with someone that's either a peer that you trust or a mentor figure that you trust, such that, we're getting in each other's business, and it's, you catch it at the desire stage rather than the 6-pack, in a massage room stage, or the international highly public scandal after your death stage, which is the context of all of this. So
yes. And also that you live transparently enough. This is another important piece, because yes, I should bust myself, and I should have people to whom I can bust myself at the desire stage, and they're not going to lose their minds. That's important. Also, it's possible that I won't bust myself the minute I should, and I should have people who are in my life enough that if something is going sideways, someone is going to notice. And what we find, and this is in the RZIM report, you can see it. Like there are signs, there are things going wrong, there are reactions that aren't right, there are, there's secretiveness, there's stuff going on that should invite that conversation, and that conversation is not happening. Most people are afraid to ask. Like, I need people in my life that if something's going weird, they're going to say, "Hey, Tim, talk to me about that," without waiting for me to initiate it.
So then if we're talking about a Christian organization in whatever context, one of the things that I said, and I still don't think this is a bad idea. Someone's going to have to convince me this is a bad idea. One of the things that I said was that, and we got pushback on this one, was, well, why don't you hire a firm? So Ravi Zacharias, Zacharias International Ministries, did this after the fact that he abused who knows how many women and wrecked his credibility and destroyed their organization. They hired a firm after the fact to overlook their communications and overlook their culture to see in what way they failed to prevent this. Why don't you do that beforehand and overlook communications and have like a yearly audit or something like that? So maybe that's one thing you're looking for. And someone, I'm saying it again, so I'm inviting more comments to tell me how ridiculous that is, and I'm open to hearing it. But it sounds like the other thing that we're saying is, if you're a Christian and you are leading something in a lay capacity, or you're candidating with this pastoral staff, you might get on the staff or something like that, that this kind of culture is what you're looking for. Like, are they in each other's business in a non-judgmental way where someone can talk about their desires and they're not anathemized, or that you're looking for that culture and you're asking questions to see if that culture exists in that organization. Is that right?
Yeah. And I'd push it a little further. I'd say, because we're called to back into Hebrews again, but consider one another in order to stir up love and good deeds, right? The word that we translate consider, it means study, scrutinize. I should be, if you and I are serving together, I should be taking a little time to have a look at Eric and what does he need? What would really help him kick it up a notch? And how can I deliver it? That should be just part of how I live. And I should be looking for that same thing from you. And not just if I'm in leadership, this is what being a Christian is. First John talks about walking in the light in 1 John 1. And we make a stupid mistake and read walking in the light as not sinning. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, and we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his son, cleanses us from all sin. What sin if walking in the light is not sinning? Walking in the light isn't about whether you sin or not. Walking in the light is almost literally what it says. It's not hiding. If we don't hide, if we the image, kind of the image he's playing with is, think about when the sun is coming up and there's still like one side of the street is in the sun and the other side of the street is still in shadow. Like the day is coming when it's going to be noon and there's going to be nowhere to hide. Right now, you can scurry for the shadows or you can walk in the light, and you should walk in the light. You should not hide. And that's just Christianity 101. This is basic to being a Christian. And what we're afraid of is that if I do that, my sin, because y'all, if I walk in the light, everybody's going to see it, and my sin is going to blow this whole thing up. And what the promise in I think it's verse 7, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with, and if you read up to that point and you don't know what it says next, you would expect it to say with him, but it doesn't. It says we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his son, cleanses us from all sin. What he promises is, if you won't hide, if you will live among my people and not hide, I will take care of the sin and you will have fellowship with one another.
Yeah, that's cool.
So Christianity 101 is, that's how we live. And what happens, this is a recon by fire thing. What happens is you're going to find the other people who want to live like that very, very quickly. Because people will either stop talking to you because you're calling them on their crap and you're asking that, hey, what's going on with that? And you're coming to them and going, hey, I need you to pray for me. I just had this moment when all of a sudden, like, I had this desire and I'm not going to do anything about it, but I want you to help me pray it off. And they're like, I want to talk about basketball, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. That's not my guy.
Right. So, I have another question that's sort of a little bit off. Not, it's on the same topic, but it could double the length of our broadcast here.
I'm good.
I think, we talked earlier about, in the beginning, like, we're going to talk about the Billy Graham rule, and then we're also going to talk about, kind of how to flee youthful lusts and that. We've talked about some of that regarding accountability and walking in the light and stuff like that. And so would you say that this is the primary thing that you should do for just your everyday normie Christian regarding pornography and your everyday lusts and stuff like that? Is it just having these light conversations or just relationships or lifestyle that is going to deal with this stuff? Or is there kind of like a plus, here are some other things that you should do? If you were to talk to our viewer, for instance, we did an episode on free will and pornography and why your theology matters regarding confronting a temptation and believing that you either can succumb to it or can choose not to, that's not insignificant and it's important. And so if you were to talk to someone that's dealing with that, what would you say to them?
So I would say what we've just been talking about is basic, and that's a great starting point. And then what's going to happen in those conversations is you're going to find what else you need to be doing. If what you need is to sign up with one of the services that monitors your computer and emails your buddy when it thinks it's got a question about what you're browsing on, then you'll find that. Like, that's going to come up.
CovenantEyes.com.
There we go.
Yeah.
Because the question is, what do you need? And there's a reason the Bible doesn't give us a formula on this.
Right.
What you need is what's going to bubble up in that conversation. What do you actually need? And you may not think of it. It may be your buddy going, I hear what you're saying and I'm not buying it. I don't think we have a plan that's going to stop you. like when I feel tempted, I'm going to call you. No, you're not.
Yeah.
We're going to do the Covenant Eyes thing because you're totally not going to call me.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, because I have a friend who, frankly, is in prison now because of where this led him. And he and I had some conversations surrounding this, and it was about, well, he made the statement, if I really want to, then I'm just going to find a way, whether it's completely wiping my PlayStation or, circumventing it in this way and stuff like that. And so that's a big, question that we're asking is in the conversation, what is it? Because you saying you're going to call me isn't necessarily going to be it. And this is almost branched off of the whole, our reluctance to want to be in each other's business, because as you're saying, this is a conversation that needs to be had. So if I can just give you the Billy Graham rule, or if I can just say you must have covenant eyes, or you must never be in your office alone with a computer and internet, then I can just give you these rules and be like,
peace.
Exactly. Which is exactly what not to do. All of those things may be great. I've got a friend who the way that she and her husband worked out on this one was they have a huge bay window in the front of their house. So they put the computer in that room with the screen facing the window.
Right. Yeah.
Just like anybody walking through the living room can see what's on your screen. Anybody walking down the street can see what's on your screen.
Yeah. If
what's on your screen shouldn't be there and somebody walking by on the sidewalk shouldn't see it, if you're a little reluctant to click that link, that's your signal, man.
Right.
And then, I mean, would I turn that into a rule for everybody? No, but it's a great idea.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff you're saying. That's the kind of stuff that will come up for you. I don't have a bay window. That doesn't work for me.
Right.
But that kind of thing would help. Would be the kind of thing that would come up that would work in your life. Because this is a great question for me too. Because I've done that with guys in youth ministry before, where I put kind of an eyes on their phone, and they've wiped their phone and. Whatever, and he begged me for the code back to his phone and everything like that. And so, those hedges didn't work. And maybe I wasn't in a place to be there enough for him, to be up in his business enough, to get uncomfortable enough. And maybe that was where I wasn't there either. So I just put that rule in place and said, see ya. And it didn't stick.
Well, and it doesn't. Well, this is the thing, right? Fences around the law don't. If there was a law that could have given life, righteousness would have come through the law. Even God's law can't give life. What are the odds that I can erect come up with a series of rules around God's law, and my rules are going to give life when even God's law won't? Not likely, right? But part of this too, this gets into your ecclesiology. In the last year, my local ministry partner that I do publishing and whatnot with, we accidentally planted a church.
Darn it!
It is now known as Front Yard Church because that's where it meets.
Nice.
And
is this the church with 90% homeless? Is it?
No, that church meets on Saturday nights. We accidentally planted another one that meets on Sunday mornings. And one of the things that this has done for me, it's a pretty small, it's more than half kids, is a number of families with a number of kids, but we're really, really tight. It's a relatively small group. We know each other well. We help each other with stuff. And it's caused me, as I read the New Testament now, I'm reading it through the lens of this is what church was actually like. These were small groups that met in homes. And when you bring something to the church, there's a sin issue that we're bringing to the church. You're bringing it to this closely knit group of people that walk through your life with you. All of a sudden, excommunication does not mean you have to go to the other mega church down the street where no one knows you. Excommunication is this group of people saying, we will not allow you to keep hanging out and pretending like this is not an issue. How can we help you actually deal with this? And when you've got that kind of presence in your life, that's a different thing than like, okay, so we're going to put covenant eyes on your phone because for you, that's a good thing. Great. Now you're texting me at 4 a.m. begging for the code. No. And also come Sunday, we're having a talk.
Right.
And guys, Drew's begging for the code. Can we please pray about this? Like with you there, like, I'm not going to tell tales behind your back. I'm going to tell tales in front of you. We're going to deal with this together.
Yeah.
And we're all going to, nobody really wants to have that conversation. But let me tell you, man, when you have, I mean, guys dealing with porn is one of the big ones, right? When you have a couple of women who matter to you, who are praying with you about it, that's going to change your world.
Huh.
Like, we need the whole body for real. And it really makes a difference.
And you're saying seek that kind of thing out and you will find it.
Yes. Those who seek find, like the rabbi said. You know?
Yeah.
But yes, be looking for that. There are people out there. What's going to happen in a typical church is you're going to scare a bunch of people. But also, there are people in every church that are desperate for this. And if you make yourself a lightning rod for it, they're going to find you.
And you'll and in one respect you'll be in trouble too, because then you're having the conversations. That's one thing that I feel like I've been lamenting a little bit about my local congregation, and really most congregations in general. You know, with the Navigators, the organization that I work with here, do a much better job of focusing in on the one-to-one mentorship and catching up and having conversations and stuff. Whereas in our local congregations, there's just no space for that at all. Really, there's not a lot of people doing it. If they are, you don't know who they are. You don't know where to connect to do it. Yeah. And I've just kind of been feeling the like, man, what, like, you know, this is unfortunate. So maybe that's our main takeaway from all of this, I think. And that's what I love about doing episodes like this, is that it's theological, but in a way that practically meets the road for us and how we live out our Christian lives, and minister to one another. And I like what you said, Tim, about the consider one another, study one another. That's an uncomfortable exhortation there, you know. Well, I'm not going to go off on the tangent.
Let me throw a little wrench.
That's a different.
Let me throw a little wrench in what you just said. So I'm not opposed to one-on-one.
Yeah.
But how many times do you see Jesus doing it?
Right.
And the sort of the poster child for the thing you would definitely do one-on-one is that conversation he has with Peter. Get behind me, Satan. You're not mindful of the things of God.
Yeah. Which he didn't do, right?
There's other guys around.
The other two are around.
So part of the difficulty is that our churches are program driven, and this is not something that's really amenable to programming. Part of the difficulty is that we think in terms of this. I've got to find this really intimate one-on-one space where I can have this reveal my terrible secret. No, I need to find a space where I've got 3, 5, 7 believers with eyes on, different gifts, men, women. You know, let's get the body to work on it. Not because what happens is any 18-year-old who's dealing with porn, let's go back to that for a second. What does he do? He finds another 18-year-old guy, and then they get together to hold each other accountable. And what that looks like is, how'd you do this week? Oh man, it was a rough week. Me too. Like, you want accountability? Tell your mom. No, she'd scream. She'd throw my computer out the window. Oh, so what you're trying to avoid is accountability that matters. Like, you want accountability? tell 3 women in your church that you have a porn problem, you want them to pray with you about it, and you're going to, check in once a week. And if you don't call them, you want them to call you, because probably there's a reason you didn't call them. Like 3 soccer moms, they're going to kill you. If you really, like, you're not going to text a soccer mom at 4 a.m. asking for the Covenant Eyes code for your phone, right?
Right.
She'll be like, "Oh yeah, we're talking. Don't you worry."
That puts it in a totally different context when, you bring the church body into that, and that's so much. It's a completely different headspace than, oh, I get to tell my buddy what I'm struggling with. That was my experience of accountability was, a peer. A peer that's struggling with the same things. I just told him, and then he would tell me, and then we'd be like, "Oh, we're accountable now." But we never, I think at the most I told a pastor, but it was one-on-one, and there wasn't anyone else brought into it. And he's super busy. Like, what is he going to do?
And that's where, like, what you're looking for is meaningful accountability, right? You want people who will check on you. You want consequences that matter. You want people whose good opinion you want, who are not struggling with the same thing you're struggling with. You also want people who are, because you want people who get what it's like from the inside. But
in the mix,
God gave us the body. Yeah. We don't use the resource that God gave us.
And then we wonder why we're trapped.
Right. And we wonder why we have all these problems and we can't seem to get any traction on it.
So what you're saying is we're not thinking corporately enough, and we need to be thinking less individually and more corporately. And
I see what you did there, Drew.
Everyone knows our view on election.
Yes. Well, I share that view on election, I think.
It's because it's the biblical view. Why wouldn't you share it? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Tim, thanks you for telling us how dumb we are in our Ravi episode, and setting us straight, giving us a holistic perspective on fleeing youthful lusts, and how you can bring the whole body of Christ into that, and how it can be something obtainable. We get stuck in this mindset, and we get trapped, and we don't know how to get out of it. And you've kind of you've thrown a grenade in that. You've shown us how we can flee those things and have that meaningful accountability with real consequences. And so we appreciate that. Thanks for the challenge on the Billy Graham rule as well. It's given us a lot to think about, and hopefully our audience. And we're gonna have to find another thing to have you on for, maybe Hebrews 6 or some other topic. We'll have you on again, and we really appreciate spending your time with us and educating us about last week free grace, and this week fleeing youthful lusts. And thanks for coming on our show.
Very much my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Good to have you, and we'll see everybody next time on the Provisionist Perspective.